Welcome to this episode of Locked In. In this episode, I'm going to be revealing the Old Man Mountain pizza rack, front rack for your bike. If you're looking for an ultra versatile rack system that'll work on whatever bike you literally own, this is the rack for you. So please stay tuned and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I don't know if I'm just getting old, but honestly, before I even get started, this is kind of my favorite thing I've added to any of my bikes, not going to lie, in at least the last year. Comment below if that's just me getting old. I'll accept it. So in this video, I'm going to be going over the specs and fitment, installation, price, and my final thoughts. Before I get into that, if you don't know who Old Man Mountain is, they basically make, in my opinion, kind of the most versatile rack systems on the market, hands down, because that is something that's always really finicky to fine-tune what works with your bike and what doesn't for front or rear, where most of their systems work on literally anything. You can basically refine in their web portal what bike you have, and they will spit out an exact fit kit if it doesn't already directly bolt onto the bike you got. With that being said, let's get into specs and fitment. The pizza rack is essentially a wider version of their Elkhorn rack that they have, which is designed to go front or rear. Realistically, the pizza rack's just designed for the front, but I guess you could probably make it work for the rear of the bike if you wanted an ultra-wide platform. Now, the dimensions for the top section of the pizza rack is 10 inches by 12.9 inches. And as you can see on the sides, it does come with 3-pack mounts, which is a new update they did to this, which I really like to make it even more versatile, so you can add any kind of bottle cage or cargo cage or one of the new flip cages to the side to make this even more versatile in a quick way that keeps it kind of tucked underneath where the rack is to keep them from getting hit or things hanging into them. And the stated load capacity for this rack is 35 pounds, and it is stated to clear a 700 by 50C tire or a 27.5 by 2.8 tire. For reference, this is on my Elant e-bike that is currently running a 700 by 50. So you can see it is on the tighter side of clearance, and you can see that it still has plenty of room. Now, getting into fitment, this is where, realistically, all I have to say is it fits whatever you got. On my bike, as you can see here, it has no carbon fender mounts. It has no mid-pack mounts. It has no fork mounts. It has nothing on it. And I was able to get this to work on this bike with their fit kit that I spec'd out for this, and it's literally been flawless. I've never had to basically retighten anything, and it's been super solid. And I have put this thing through its paces with hundreds of miles and fully loaded on bike packing trips. And it's been, honestly, again, one of my favorite upgrades. So all you have to do for Fitment is go to their fit guide and input your bike that you have. Now, for my bike, since it's currently not being produced anymore, I emailed them and actually spit out what I needed because they had, I'm assuming, old resources that might not be active on the website. So don't fret if you don't have your exact bike listed in the links or the drop downs on their menu system. Just hit them up directly. They've been really great with customer service in general. Now let's get on to installation. They have a great installation guide, so I won't get into the details for this video. I will link their description below. And there's a couple things you need to keep in mind because, again, this is a universal fit rack, which is true, but that means there is going to be some more tweaking to this than a standard bolt-on affair. What that typically means is, obviously, you're going to install the axle kit or fit kit that goes with your bike on to replace the axle that's currently on your bike. And then basically you're going to have to assemble the rack itself. And again, you can reference their video on the order of things depending on the width and tire size that you're going with. So again, I'm not going to get into those kind of details. After that, the only thing you really have to modify is basically those support bars that you can see coming down. Those are going to need to be bent into a way to where they basically come into the point that meets up with the fork. And again, I'm speaking to my exact scenario where I had a carbon fork where you're using these little rubber grommets with a built-in riv nut. You can screw those arms in. If you have, obviously, mounting holes on your fork with either 3-pack or even mid-fender or anything like that, this is going to be a lot simpler. So you can kind of skip past this little section if you have something that bolts directly on. But for all the carbon fiber fork riders out there who might not have all those mounts, this is all you really have to do is slightly tweak it to work with your fork and the angle that everything sits at. Can't really give you any pro tips on this. Just do it little by little. What I basically did was I grabbed the bar itself, wrapped a rag around it, and then I basically held it on a metal ledge on my apartment complex and just kind of tweaked one side little by little, going back and forth. This is going to be the longest part of the install, to be honest, if you really want to get it dialed in where everything flows really nice. And then obviously repeat the same shape on the other side. But after it's basically done and set up, you're going to put the clear bra around the parts where the rubber is going to meet the fork, and then you're going to use their heavy-duty zip ties to secure it, which you want to do little by little and let it rest over a little while, and then keep tightening it because they are industrial strength, so they do take a little bit longer to settle in than your standard zip tie. After that, we're basically set up and everything's good to roll. Now we're going to get into price. And I am going to put a couple of things you're going to notice in this video that I did use as some of their accessories. But essentially, this is a very high quality rack, and it is currently going to retail at $188 for the rack itself, then an additional, on average, $68 for the fit kit that you're going to need. Now, that is if you were replacing an axle and needing other components on there. So that price may vary based on how little or much you're going to need. Now, if your bike has fender mounts and let's say a mid-pack or a 3-pack mount on the side, you may not need anything to add to that. So again, your pricing is going to vary based on that. The other thing I'm going to mention briefly in this section is the basket. The basket was something that I did try out as well and really, really liked. And the basket does retail at an additional $80, which will come with all the hardware to bolt it into this rack. Or what I honestly did was zip tie it in multiple places because I knew I wanted to quickly take it off and on, and I didn't mind burning some zip ties. But I'll be getting into that in my final thoughts of the use case for that. So that being said, before I get into my final thoughts, there's one thing that you're probably going to ask, and I'll go over it quickly. And again, I'm going to re-reference their videos on how to change a flat if you have this installed on your front. How hard is it? Or just taking the wheel out. Honestly, that is something that does take a couple extra steps, but just to make it super brief, in case you were wondering, all you're going to do is remove the bolts that are threaded into your replacement axle. Then basically what I did was I just kind of lifted and pushed back the rack out of the way of the axle so I could pull the wheel out. It's an extra little step. The only thing you got to be mindful of is the screws are relatively small, and there is one spacer on one side you basically need to keep track of. I would just put in my pocket. I never lost them over the course of utilizing this. And minus the spacer, it's all standard hardware you could get from the hardware store if needed, or obviously hit up Old Man Mountain to get some replacements. But again, watch that video in the description below to kind of understand the extra step that you're going to need to do if you are going to need to take the wheel off your bike regularly, or if you do get a flat, what to expect. So now let's get into my final thoughts. I honestly, like I said at the beginning of this video, really like this rack, and I honestly think it's one of the best upgrades I've done to my Elant, which I think is the ultimate commuter bike that I've ever built. And I might be doing a video on that later down the line of why this e-bike has literally 8,000 miles on it. I use it to ride to work and love it. And it's honestly the most ridden bike I've ever owned in the decade plus I've ridden my bike. But this platform allowed me to just do so much more stuff or be honestly kind of forgetful. I ran this in multiple different setups. When I commuted day to day, I typically ran it with just this bungee strap that I sourced from Amazon. And that allowed me to, if I wanted to do a quick pickup of something else that might have not fit in my rear bag that I leave on my bike, which I've done a video on what I carry every single day, which has some storage in it, but I wanted potentially some other versatility to where I could strap down a bag as long as I could kind of close it or tie it up top and have it secure enough on there to where I could ride home. Or if I'd ride with, let's say, a thick jacket on my morning commute, I could just stuff it onto the rack, bungee tie it down, and ride it home to work if, again, I didn't have storage for it somewhere on the bike. That being said, I also love the basket. The basket was definitely the most convenient thing to leave on there because, again, that could just take stuff, and then I just had a mesh net over it. I loved it for when I went bike camping. I could just put a ton of stuff in there, whether we're going to the store to get more food or just stuffing a stuff sack worth of whatever in there, and they just packing so much quicker and easier. The 3-pack mounts on the side, I realistically used for bottle mounts. And again, could utilize it for a dry bag or anything else. I didn't do any super long excursions where I needed that much stuff. But again, great feature. And you probably noticed that I did switch out the hardware to titanium oil slick because everything has to match on all my bikes. It's a problem. I have to deal with it. I never had a flat while riding this, but sometimes when I did need to transport my bike inside of a vehicle, taking the front wheel off was an extra minute or two that I had to deal with and remember to take all the parts off. If I had to do it every single day, yes, that would get super annoying. But if I would have had a bike rack that grabs on just to the wheels, a tray style hitch mount, totally would have been fine. Wouldn't have had to deal with it. Would have never noticed. So realistically, not that big of a deal unless, again, you have to take off that front wheel regularly. It might get a little annoying if you don't, again, have a fork that has mounts to where you're not replacing the axle with the fit kit. Pricing wise, obviously this is an investment. It is a nicer rack than most, in my opinion. It's got a really well thought out design that works with everything. So you're not worried about compatibility. You can make this fit whatever you got. I think that's just awesome in general. The quality on this thing's been awesome. You've probably seen a bunch of videos and reviews of their other racks, and I can really tell you can really stand behind the product. The basket itself is a walled basket size basket. So if you do get a walled basket bag or any other accessories that fit on a walled, it does work with that. And the holes on the side are basically molly strap style. So you can get a host of other MOLLE strap accessories to add to this. Again, versatility out the window. I really, really like it. Are there any negatives to this? Honestly, no, not a real negative that I haven't already kind of mentioned. And I wouldn't say it's a negative. It's just a work with having a front rack. Taking it on and off or taking the wheel off. If you didn't want to run it full time, again, depending on how you set it up, could be a little bit annoying. Obviously, it is a higher end rack setup than your basic wall basket, but it looks better. It's sturdier. I believe the weight rating is better, and I could be wrong. You can comment below if I am, but honestly, I think this is a killer rack, and I can't wait to review more of their products going forward on this channel. So make sure to subscribe and turn notifications on if you haven't yet. So that being said, please write in the comments below if you have an Old Man Mountain product or what rack you like to use and set up for regular riding or even bike packing. I'd love to hear it. Lastly, I do want to say this rack was provided by Old Man Mountain, but I by no means paid to do this review. This is all my own thoughts. They didn't see this video before it went up, and honestly, I'm just hyped on this thing. You can watch a bunch of my reviews, and I don't know why this rack has got me so excited, but it has. So that being said, thanks for watching this episode of Locked In.
Let's get locked in today. Like tutorials and quick and